Have you ever observed how certain individuals possess an almost mystical ability to influence their surroundings without uttering a single word? They don't raise their voices, they don't plead, they simply step back, and suddenly the entire atmosphere transforms. The energy shifts, people begin to wonder, to pursue, to experience emotions. Now picture what would occur if you adopted the same approach. If you ceased responding instantly to every situation, if you selected quiet contemplation over automatic replies, strategic withdrawal over emotional outbursts, what outcome do you anticipate? This is where true influence resides. When you stop making yourself constantly accessible emotionally, physically, and mentally, the environment around you enters a state of uncertainty. Others have grown accustomed to managing you through your responses, through your impulses, through your predictable nature. But the moment you decide to withdraw, the dynamics shift completely, and those who believed they understood you discover they comprehend absolutely nothing about your true self. A renowned psychologist once observed that everything which troubles us about others can guide us toward greater self-awareness. Consider this. When you become unreachable, who becomes truly anxious? Who shows irritation? Who attempts to provoke you just to extract some emotional response? This reveals far more about them than about you, and it primarily shows how extensively you've been influenced without recognizing it. You continue offering yourself to satisfy others, to preserve harmony, to avoid losing people who, in reality, were never genuinely present in your life. With each reluctant agreement, every instant reply, every emotional outburst, you surrender a fragment of your vital energy. By day's end, what remains? Exhaustion, frustration, an inexplicable emptiness. But let me explain why this happens. It's because you're too accessible to those who don't merit even a moment of your silence. This presentation isn't about turning away from society. It's about prioritizing yourself. It's about mastering what psychologists call self-actualization, the journey of becoming complete, authentic, and whole. This journey begins when you realize that silence can be more powerful than countless arguments. That withdrawal, when stemming from awareness rather than avoidance, represents an act of personal power. So I ask you directly, how much longer will you allow others' emotions to control you? How long will you respond like a marionette each time someone touches your sensitive spots? Perhaps it's time to sever those strings, to withdraw, to become enigmatic. Because when you stop being constantly available, everything transforms. You've been taught to always be present, to respond quickly, to please others, to agree even when you wanted to refuse. From childhood, you've been programmed to believe your value depends on how accessible you are to others. But here's a truth perhaps no one has shared with such clarity. This excessive availability isn't virtuous. It's imprisonment. As long as you continue believing you must be accessible constantly, emotionally or otherwise, you'll be manipulated, drained, and discarded once you're no longer useful. Do you understand why? Because constant availability makes you appear predictable, and anything predictable becomes a tool. People begin using you as an emotional emergency contact. They activate you when they need attention, comfort, or validation, then set you aside. But you don't recognize this because you're trapped in the illusion that being present for everyone will make someone present for you. But that's not how it functions. Psychological research discusses the persona, this mask we wear to be accepted, loved, recognized. It's precisely this mask that keeps you overly available. You claim everything is fine when you're suffocating. You respond to messages instantly even when exhausted. You explain, justify, and defend yourself as if you owe the world something. The truth is, the more you place yourself center stage in others' dramas, the more you vanish from your own life. Being constantly available is a subtle form of self-abandonment, a disguised method of seeking approval, avoiding rejection, attempting to control others' perceptions of you. But this control comes at a cost, and that cost is your peace, your vital energy being distributed as if it were unlimited when it's actually finite, very finite. Those who demand your constant availability don't actually want you, they want what you provide. Validation, companionship, distraction, emotional comfort. But when you change, when you establish boundaries, when you refuse to react, these same people become irritated, accuse you, claim you've become strange. It's not because you've changed, it's because you've stopped being functional for them. Here's the harshest reality. The more available you are, the less others value you. What's too abundant becomes worthless. No one respects what they don't have to earn. No one values what's always there. So pause and reflect. Who truly merits your time? Who deserves your attention, your presence, your listening? Or more importantly, who deserves your absence? But before answering that, we must understand something essential. Why do we react so intensely? Why do we surrender so easily? What drives this almost automatic urge to respond, justify, and please? The answer lies in what psychology calls mental energy, and that's our next topic. Your energy is everything you possess, and if you don't learn to protect it, someone will use it against you. If this content resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Psychology doesn't view the human mind as an automatic machine responding to stimuli without consequences. Our consciousness operates like an energy system, and every thought, emotion, and action consumes part of that energy. The question is, are you choosing where your energy flows, or are you letting the world decide for you? Every impulsive reaction wastes mental energy. When you defend against criticism that didn't deserve attention, when you respond to provocation just to prove your point, when you engage in pointless discussions, when you try pleasing those who don't value you, you're spending your inner strength on what doesn't nourish you. Psychological wisdom teaches us that what you resist persists. The more you react, the more you bind yourself. People living emotionally drained lives aren't weak, they're misdirected. And do you know what happens to someone living exhausted? They become vulnerable. When you're vulnerable, you become easy prey. Manipulative, opportunistic, and emotionally needy individuals can sense this vulnerability. They notice you don't know how to guard your energy, that you react to everything, that you're always trying to fix the world, and they exploit it. Research shows that a healthy psyche knows how to maintain energy within the system. This means knowing how to refuse without guilt, knowing how to remain silent without feeling cowardly, knowing how to observe before acting. True power isn't in reacting, it's in choosing when and how to act. This is only possible when you know yourself well enough to recognize your own impulses. How often have you lost sleep over an unresolved conversation? How many times have you spent hours ruminating about what you should have said or trying to understand why someone treated you poorly? This is energy being drained without return. You're keeping alive phantoms that should have died long ago, feeding dynamics that exist only because you insist on responding. Mental energy is like a protective field. When well guarded, it creates presence. You enter a room and command respect without speaking. When poorly managed, you become invisible, reactive, fragile. The world shows no mercy to those who surrender easily. Therefore, start observing your own triggers. What makes you react automatically? What makes you lose your center? These are the exact points where your energy escapes, and that's where you need to work. Not to become cold or indifferent, but to be selective, to be sovereign over yourself. Here comes one of psychology's greatest revelations. When you conserve your energy, you break the projections others place upon you, and that disturbs many people. We're now entering dark territory, that of silent manipulation. In the next section, we'll explore how opportunistic people feed off your energy and why your unavailability completely dismantles these games. Prepare to look into the eyes of those who have always drained you without your awareness. You believe you're in control. You think your reactions are conscious choices. But the truth is darker. Most of your emotional responses are programmed, and those who understand this manipulate you effortlessly. Opportunistic people don't need to raise voices, threaten, or force situations. They simply activate the triggers you've left exposed, and you react predictably. Psychology calls this projection, the mental mechanism through which people project onto others what they cannot see in themselves. But there's another aspect to this phenomenon that few notice. While others project onto you, you also become the container for these images. The more emotionally available you are, the more you become a blank canvas for these projections. You know that friend who only contacts you during crises? That partner who always needs you to save the day? That person who praises you but only while you're useful to them? None of this is coincidental. They're not relating to you. They're relating to the idea of you, to the role you agree to play. Why do you agree? Because you fear disappointing, fear not being loved, fear abandonment. The most effective manipulation doesn't happen through shouting. It happens in guilt silence, when you feel you owe something to others, when you believe you must be available, must help, must understand, even when it destroys you internally. Here's the central point. The manipulator doesn't need to control you. They just need you to keep reacting the same way. But when you stop reacting, the game breaks. When you start refusing, responding with silence, withdrawing instead of explaining yourself, the projections begin crumbling. The mask they've placed on you falls, and this unsettles people because they no longer know who you are. Worse, now they're forced to confront themselves, and not everyone is prepared for that. Your unavailability is threatening because it forces others to confront their own emptiness. The silence you offer reveals the internal noise they don't want to hear. Then comes the attack, the criticism, the emotional drama, not because you're wrong, but because you stopped serving as a convenient mirror. Psychological research shows we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the cycle, others' shadow begins emerging. This is unbearable for those who have always used you as an escape. But what about you? Are you ready to handle the discomfort of being misunderstood, rejected, or even attacked for protecting yourself? Are you prepared to endure the silence that comes after the rupture? Because it's precisely in that silence that a new kind of power is born. That's what we'll discuss next. In the following section, you'll understand why silence can be the most devastating weapon of human psychology and how it completely changes the dynamic between you and the world. The modern world is noisy. Everyone wants to be heard, wants to respond quickly, wants to win pointless debates and prove their point even if it costs them their peace. But there's a power few know and even fewer master. The power of silence. Not passive or cowardly silence, but conscious, strategic, brutally lucid silence. The kind that isn't absence, but amplified presence. Psychology views silence not as emptiness, but as fertile ground for inner transformation. When you stop reacting, you begin observing. By observing, you see patterns that previously went unnoticed. Emotional repetitions, manipulation games, cycles of self-sabotage. Silence allows for clarity, and clarity is dangerous for those who live to control you. Have you noticed how some people panic when you don't respond? When you don't explain yourself? When you simply disappear? It's not because they miss you, it's because your silence removes their narrative control. While you speak, you're still in the game. When you're silent, you change the rules, and that unbalances anyone who thrives on your reaction. True silence isn't voice absence, it's mastery over your own energy. It's refusing to be dragged down by someone else's emotions. It's the conscious choice not to engage in battles unworthy of your strength. Psychological research shows that individuation, becoming who you truly are, requires this distancing, because only in silence can you listen to yourself without the world's interference. But don't be deceived. Silence has a price. It will distance you from people who only valued you for the role you played. It will make you incomprehensible to those who only saw you through their projections. It will make you seem cold, distant, arrogant. But all this is reaction from those who never wanted to deal with your depth, only your utility. Here's the hard truth. The more you mature, the more selective you become with your words, because you understand each sentence is an energetic investment, and not everyone deserves access to your truth. Sometimes silence isn't retreat, it's sovereignty. It's the language of those who no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Silence is uncomfortable because it forces others to deal with their own thoughts, their internal noise. This discomfort reveals more about them than any argument could reveal. You don't need to explain your absence, it explains itself. Those who feel threatened by it reveal how much they depended on your imbalance to maintain their control. But the most powerful silence isn't what disturbs others, it's the silence that reconstructs you from within. The silence that connects you to something beyond external approval. In this internal space, free from others' demands, you begin recovering your vital energy, reconnecting with your essence. This is precisely what we'll discuss next, because it's not enough to just eliminate external noise. You need to relearn how to use your energy consciously, to choose where it goes, where it stays, and most importantly, where it should never be wasted. It's time to learn selectivity with your own soul. If you're in the process of reclaiming your energy and setting boundaries, you'll find real value in exploring deeper psychological concepts that provide tools to protect your energy, set boundaries, and reconnect with your true self. It's useless understanding all this intellectually if in practice you continue saying yes when you mean no, responding to messages that bother you, participating in empty conversations, and maintaining relationships that exist only from inertia. Awareness without action is just another form of self-deception. True transformation begins when you firmly decide to become selective, and this requires emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability isn't about being cold, arrogant, or indifferent. It's about no longer being accessible to anyone at any time for any reason. It's about taking control of your energy, your time, your peace. This starts with small actions, not responding immediately, breathing before reacting, leaving discussions before being dragged into chaos, turning off your phone without guilt, saying, "Not today," saying, "I'm not interested," saying, "I won't get involved." But here's the most important part. You don't need to justify your absence. You don't need to explain your silence. You owe nothing to anyone but yourself. For many people, this is unforgivable, because when you refuse to explain yourself, you remove their power to keep you within an emotional narrative where you're always the helpful, understanding, accessible one. Psychology teaches that every individuation process goes through isolation, not depressive isolation, but sacred isolation, a time of inner retreat where you relearn to listen to your own voice without the world's interference, where you rebuild your identity not based on others' gaze, but from your own center. Want to know a good measure of your evolution? Observe who starts distancing themselves when you become more reserved. Observe who tries to provoke you when you stop reacting. Observe who accuses you of changing when you finally start protecting yourself. These aren't signs you're wrong. They're proof you've begun freeing yourself. Being unavailable is uncomfortable at first. You'll feel guilty. You'll think you're being selfish. You'll hear you're being too harsh. But this is part of the deconstruction process. You've spent your life being conditioned to put yourself second. It's natural that change causes discomfort, not only in you, but in everyone who benefited from your old version. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. When you say no to the world, you're saying yes to yourself. When you withdraw from a toxic environment, you're reaffirming that your peace is worth more than any false connection. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin being respected, even if by few. Not everyone is ready for this type of presence, because your emotional absence will expose wounds they don't want to face. It will reveal how much they depended on your emotional chaos to feel in control. At this moment comes the rupture, and with the rupture comes pain, loneliness, estrangement, the feeling you're losing something when you're actually just freeing yourself. But what happens after that? What comes after the distancing? What is born from silence? In the final part, we'll discuss this, about the rebirth that only happens when you have courage to be misunderstood, to be alone, and to become whole on your own. It's time to understand why the solitude of the strong is the path to true freedom. When you stop being available to everyone, something profound begins happening. First comes silence, an uncomfortable silence that seems to scream inside you. You wonder if you did the right thing, if you're being too harsh, if you're losing people who cared about you. But gradually this silence transforms. It begins cleansing, calming, healing. Then comes solitude, not the solitude of absence, but the solitude of total presence with yourself. The solitude of the strong, the solitude of one who no longer betrays themselves to keep others close. In that space where confusion once existed, clarity enters. Where anxiety once lived, peace enters. Where neediness once resided, a new kind of strength enters. The strength of being complete within yourself. Psychology shows that individuation, becoming who you really are, requires distancing yourself from the collective, disidentifying from the mask, walking alone for a while. That's exactly what you're doing when you decide to become unavailable. You're not fleeing the world, you're returning to yourself. At this point, you stop being a reactor and become a creator. You cease being shaped by circumstances and begin shaping your reality from within. The people who feel uncomfortable with your absence reveal they never wanted you. They wanted the role you played. Now that you no longer fit, they don't know what to do with you. And that's liberating. You'll lose people, but you'll find yourself. You'll distance yourself from places, but you'll reconnect with your essence. You'll become misunderstood, but finally you'll begin being respected. Because when you're no longer available for anything, you become valuable, rare, unforgettable. Don't be fooled, this is rebirth, a new beginning. The start of a life where you're no longer available for emotional crumbs, for mind games, for emptiness disguised as affection. Now you only accept what resonates with your peace, your truth, your wholeness. If you've made it this far, it's because part of you is already ready for this new path. Part of you has already understood that being loved means nothing if you have to abandon yourself for it. And that true self-love begins when you choose yourself, even if it costs you being alone for a while. Now tell me in the comments, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, or even disliked in the name of your inner freedom? Are you willing to pay the price of being yourself? If this message touched you, if it made sense, write in the comments, I choose my peace. Let's see how many here are ready for this transformation. And if you're serious about becoming the kind of person others admire, hit that subscribe button, because I'm here to help you grow stronger, sharper, and more respected. One habit at a time. Don't forget, keep watching the next video. It's important, much more than you imagine. See you there.